There was a time, not too long ago, when a given anime could receive an alternate universe movie adaptation alongside its existing TV counterpart. Often these films would tinker with the plot lines, the very nature of certain characters, and potentially tell just a radically different story from that of the main series. Shows like Eureka 7, Razafon, and Escaflowne are just a few examples of what I'm referring to. All three had films created after their main series ended, which told an entirely separate story in a brand new continuity. However, in these cases, the films and TV series were both made by the same studio. For today, the topic we're going to discuss does not have that stipulation. Many longtime anime fans will know about the key Kyoto Animation Holy Trinity, the three key visual novel adaptations done by Kyoto Animation in the mid-2000s, those being Air, Canon, and Clannad. What you may not know is that all three series also possess alternate adaptations done by Toei Animation. In Canon's case, this was a 2002 13-episode TV adaptation, which has largely been forgotten and derided due to 1, never being licensed or released in the West, and 2, being pretty rushed in comparison to the 2006 series. Also, it does have some questionable character designs, to say the least. But for Clannad and Air, Toei made movie adaptations. If you've seen the very first video ever posted on this channel, you know that I don't hold the Clannad movie, released only a few weeks before the TV series premiered in 2007, in the highest regard. Way too much needed to be cut to fit the runtime, and the characters are just a bit too off of what you'd expect from them, especially the leads. And I'm not alone in holding that opinion, so what we've established is that 2 of the Toei versions of the series are far and away considered worse than the KyoAni adaptations. But what about Air, whose film notably released while the show was still airing? Well, opinions certainly do vary, of course, but the debate between the Air series and Air movie is definitely the most interesting and most relevant of the three. And so, let's take a look at both adaptations, their positives and negatives, and try to figure out which one is superior. I will be openly discussing spoilers going forward, so you have been warned. With that long prelude out of the way, let's dive right into this. So, of course, some people prefer the show, some people prefer the movie, some even like both. That's not surprising. What's interesting is that a notable number of people dislike both adaptations because they prefer the original visual novel and see both as failing to capture it properly. This is why you'll sometimes come across people saying they actually want a third adaptation of Air, and usually they'll include the requirement of having at least double the episode count. What I'm getting at here is that Air TV is already seen as a rushed story, one that doesn't have enough time to flesh out its many story elements. And I agree, the show only has 12 episodes, not counting the 2 OVAs or the episode 13 recap, and it struggles to do everything it wants to do in that short runtime. Even with only 3 main heroines, the arcs come off as rushed and convoluted, especially with Misuzu's going in a very unexpected direction, with the protagonist Yukito effectively dying, becoming a bird, and us getting a couple very sudden backstory episodes out of the blue while this is going on, jumping the setting and characters we've been following to an entirely new one, 1,000 years in the past with different people. It's jarring, it's sudden, it doesn't feel right, and I don't think the series does a good job of integrating this ultimately essential backstory information into the main story. Having a higher episode count to give everything some breathing room and maybe to transition into different arcs more naturally might have made the difference here. Too much is going on in a short number of episodes, and truthfully, removing your main character like they did with Yukito while certainly ballsy, wasn't necessarily a smart decision. I mean, I'm not exactly satisfied with the whole turning into Sky the Crow thing, personally. So you would think that the Air movie, with far less time to play with than a 12-episode series, would be even more rushed and convoluted, right? Surprisingly, not at all. With only 90 minutes to its name, the Air movie is able to tell its story and integrate its backstory in an incredibly natural way. It heavily streamlines the story, but never to the point of depriving it of value or emotional weight. Of course, the other heroines in Kano and Minagi have their arcs cut and are reduced to cameo appearances in a single shot alongside Michiru, and Kano's sister has a minor supporting role, just basically as Misuzu's nurse. So if someone was a fan of these characters and their arcs, they'll probably hate the Air movie for cutting them, especially if they also dislike the series for barely spending time on them either. As for me though, I never really cared for Kano or Minagi anyway. Their arcs came off as way too messy and, yes, rushed. So I honestly think cutting them was completely for the best. There just isn't time for them in one single movie. But I can definitely understand the opposite perspective, as I disliked how the Clannad movie cut out most of the other heroines, even if I could understand the reason why. So the film therefore places its focus squarely on Yukito, Misuzu, and Haruko. The main heroine is the main story. What else? Well, the film further streamlines the story in a way that I honestly think is genius. Instead of randomly diverting from the story to give us the backstory on Kana and the curse, the movie weaves it into the narrative by having Misuzu research it for a project she's doing to make up for missing so much school due to her being sick so much. As she explores and learns more about the legend, so do we, the audience. Little by little, the story is narrated by Misuzu and presented to us in a much more digestible fashion. It's not all at once, like in the TV show. Plus, the decision to have the backstory be a known legend was, I think, another very smart decision. It grounds the whole thing considerably by attaching it to the town and making it feel more naturally attached to the story as a result, rather than it just feeling like an unrelated thing being thrown at us out of nowhere like in the TV series. On top of that, the movie makes the celebration of the legend the main reason why the big summer festival happens every year, further tying it into the rest of the story and making it feel like a necessary and expected inclusion. As such, the streamlining done in the movie succeeds in making the curse backstory more comprehensible and at home with everything else going on. It gives us the relevant information bit by bit as Misuzu researches it, making it all the more believable and clearly relevant by attaching it to the town and festival. And it doesn't bother trying to replace our main characters with those from the legend like the show does for a couple episodes. It all flows so much more nicely, and I'm amazed at how well the film makes it all work. Now let's touch on Yukito specifically. In the series, he's very abruptly torn out of the story, for better or for worse. In the movie, this never happens. Sky is just a regular old crow here, and Yukito never dies or gets turned into any other animal. He remains our protagonist from start to finish, which actually provides the film with its main theme, finding purpose. The movie begins with Yukito monologuing about how he doesn't believe you can be a wanderer if you have any sort of big objective or goal to realize. Other than making money off his puppeteering, which he actually is successful with in the film, and finding food, he specifically does not want to have a purpose guiding him along. He wants to drift, nothing more. Of course, the reason for this is because he wants to avoid the whole being a reincarnation of the guy from the legend and needing to break the curse thing. He wants nothing to do with it, and is literally running away from it. But of course, he stumbles upon Misuzu anyway, fate having its way in the end. And the whole point of the movie is Yukito deciding not to run away from his purpose anymore, despite how much he may want to at times. Keeping Yukito alive and actually having his growth be a focal point of the story shouldn't be a notable thing, but it is with how the TV series handled him. As I said before, different isn't always better, and the ballsy move from the show just isn't as effective as the more standard theme and character progression seen in the movie. Yukito's survival ties in significantly with the ending. In the series, after getting a couple episodes focused on Misuzu and Haruko's awkward relationship in the show, Misuzu dies in her arms on the beach. We all know this, right? She's dead. Yukito's a bird. The ending is very well known for being depressing and worthy of tears. In the movie, however, Yukito is there as well. After accepting his feelings for Misuzu and resolving to help her, and they even plan to take her to a hospital because her illness is manifesting as physical ailments in the movie rather than the show's crying fits, Misuzu dies trying to reach the two people she loves on the beach. She dies, Yukito gets to live, but the sad scene is largely recreated in the movie. Yukito surviving is already a major difference, but perhaps the more significant change actually involves the curse itself. The show's ending goes for a melancholic resolution with a silver lining to satisfy the audience and make all of the sacrifice seem like it was worth it. Yes, Misuzu dies. Yes, Yukito is now a bird. But the 1,000-year curse is broken. Kana's cycle of reincarnation is over because of their sacrifice. In the movie, Misuzu still dies, but Yukito survives, and the curse is not broken. In both cases, you have two sad things occurring and one good thing occurring, and the good thing is supposed to counterbalance the sad. The silver lining in both versions needs to satisfy watchers despite the sad events that have transpired, and ultimately, satisfaction will be in the eye of the beholder. But for me, the series never made me satisfied. The silver lining here really doesn't work because I never felt a reason to care about the curse in the series. It's introduced way too late and way too jarringly for me to have any attachment to it. And it being broken really can't come close as a result to balancing out the depressing fates for both our leads. Meanwhile, in the movie, I was, in fact, very satisfied. Yes, Misuzu's fate is the same, but the swapping of how Yukito and the curse end up turning out works to the film's benefit. This is Yukito's movie, Yukito's story. He needs to learn something by the end of it, so that his life can now have purpose, and he can stop wandering around aimlessly. And he gains this purpose through failing to break the curse. His survival results in the Yukito we see at the end of the film resolving to find Misuzu wherever she reincarnates and save her once and for all. He's learned through the events of the movie to fulfill his destiny and stop running from it. He now has a goal, and even if we never get to see him break the curse, we can rest assured that he ultimately will. And this, to me, is a vastly superior ending to the one where he just becomes a crow and does break the curse, given I never cared for the curse that much in the first place in the TV series. The movie's ending works and successfully balances the sad with the happy, resulting in a satisfying and hopeful resolution to its story and characters. The show's ending may bring a halt to the 1,000 years of unending reincarnation, but it never made me give a damn about that. And that was the biggest failing. Having an ending where both leads are effectively gone can certainly work, but their loss needs to feel worth it to achieve something truly great that wouldn't be possible without it. If they gave everything but saved the world in the process, the ending can be very satisfying. Look at something like Madoka Magica, for example. With their TV, to me at least, the loss does not match the reward. Now, the film can be criticized for a number of other points. Haruko and Misuzu's relationship is a pretty normal one in the film, though the plot point of her father trying to take Misuzu away is still present as it is in the series. But this results in Haruko's whole attitude of not getting close to Misuzu due to not knowing when she's going to get taken away from her that we see in the series being completely removed. And this could certainly be a negative for some, as the focus on their bond in the show is one that I've seen a lot of love for. Again, the film basically had to cut this due to its short runtime, but I think it probably was for the best anyway. Haruko's actions in the show, while a good source for emotional moments and growth, kinda sorta don't make a lot of sense. If Misuzu had been with her for only a short time, I could maybe see where she was coming from, but after years, come on. You're just being a bad parent at that point, and it just kind of felt silly to me that she would still be afraid of getting close to her at that point, even if the risk of her father coming to take her away always hung over Haruko's head. So while I recognize the loss of emotional growth from the film's removal of this plot point, I think it makes for a less frustrating experience overall, especially since Misuzu's father trying to take her away still does happen. That's not removed, and it's still an incredibly emotional and important part of the story in the film. I'll also note that the film is much clearer that Yuito and Misuzu are in love with each other, whereas the series is more vague on it, despite the whole their past lives being in love with each other thing as well. I've seen a number of people view Yukito and Misuzu's bond in the show as more of just a sibling or strong friendship dynamic instead of romantic, even with this being a visual novel adaptation and all. Because of that, I'm sure the film's explicit framing of the bond as romantic will bother people. And given the movie's short runtime, it is definitely true that the romantic development there can feel rushed. But with all that taken into consideration, I think it is abundantly clear that I believe the Air movie to be the superior version of the story, even if I recognize why others might prefer the show instead. Especially if they're coming from a visual novel accuracy perspective, because even if the show is shorter than visual novel fans would like, there is no debating that it is a more accurate adaptation than the film is. But accurate isn't always better. And now the unfortunate thing about all of this is, how exactly should Air be recommended to someone who hasn't seen it? I've always struggled with this question because I feel like the show is very flawed, but I wonder how someone who has never experienced Air at all would react to just seeing the movie. Because I watched the film for the first time the same day I finished the series and its OVAs for the first time. And while I have rewatched the film on its own since then, I wonder if seeing the series helped me fill in gaps concerning character dynamics that might have been present if I hadn't. Like, would I care as much about the characters in the movie if I hadn't seen these alternate versions of them in the show? And I'll never know the answer to this. I can only know the perspective I have, which is one of seeing the show and then the movie. So even though I want to tell people to just watch the movie, I've always been worried that they won't value it as much as I do if they haven't seen the series first. And that's awkward, right? To tell someone to watch a 12-episode, really a 14-episode show that I think is kind of whatever before they watch a movie. It might be too much for someone to trudge through just to get to the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. But I could be completely wrong, and I would love to see more perspectives on this dilemma. Anyway, what do you think about Air? Did you enjoy the TV series, the movie, both, or neither? Do you care about accuracy to the visual novel, or just care about whatever is the better story? How do you feel about the changes the film makes to streamline things, and do you think it works out for the best? And of course, which version of Air do you think is superior? Leave your thoughts and perspectives down in the comments below. I think it's really fascinating how this is the only example among the 3 dual key adaptations that these questions really apply to. For Canon and Clannad, it's widely agreed that the Kyoto Animation shows are better, but here, well, I, for one at least, greatly prefer Toei's movie adaptation. So that's it from me. Take care, and I'll see you all next time.